Hi there. I hope you and your loved ones are in good health during these difficult times. Let's start by reviewing what we discussed in our previous video. In our first video, we talked about ways to guess meaning from context using our knowledge of synonyms, antonyms, common sense, and sometimes even the roots of the words. We further emphasize that our knowledge of the structural clues is an asset in discovering what unfamiliar words mean. Now let's start by looking at our aims. Right, have a look. Hopefully, by the end of the lesson, we will have learned about Paul Nation's 4 strands of a well-balanced course and also extensive reading. Well, what are Paul Nation's 4 strands of a well-balanced language course? Paul Nation believes there are 4 parts that we should pay attention to. These 4 parts are 1. Meaning-based input, 2. Meaning-based output, 3. Language-focused learning, and 4. Fluency development. Before I tell you what they are, let me say that what the basic idea behind the 4 strands is. The basic idea is that we'll have to spend roughly the same amount of time on each of these strands or parts. I'll explain that briefly later. But what does each part mean, or each strand means? Meaning-focused input or meaning-based input involves getting input through listening and reading, where the learner's focus is on understanding the message and where only a small proportion of language features are outside the learner's present level of proficiency. Again, we'll discuss this in length in the later slides. In a reading program, extensive reading is likely to be the major source of meaning-based input. And in this video, we'll focus our attention on the first strand, as I said. But do the other strands mean anything special? Of course they do. What kind of question is this? What do they cover? The second one, that is, meaning-based output, is about producing language through speaking and writing. The focus is on others understanding the message. We are not going to dwell on meaning-focused output here. We'll do it maybe later. The third strand is language-focused learning, and it is when we are talking about learning and teaching some things like grammar, vocabulary, discourse, or pronunciation. Language-focused learning occurs in intensive reading, and we'll discuss this probably next week. And finally, fluency development. Fluency development means using and reusing what we already know best. We will also talk about fluency development later, but I should mention that unfortunately fluency development is often neglected in our courses, mainly because teachers and learners feel that they should always be learning something new. Okay, remember that meaning-based output has 2 parts. What were they? Reading and listening. What are we focusing on here today? On reading, because our course is reading skills. I mean, we are not going to spend time on the listening part of it, but obviously if you plan to have a well-balanced education in a foreign language, you can apply the same principles to listening. There are 2 major things that I should be mentioning here. One is the logic. Remember I told you about the logic behind the 4 strands. What was it? The logic is that basically the same amount of time should be allocated for each strand. Let me clarify this a little bit. Well, this means, for instance, if every day we want to spend 4 hours on learning a language, say English, for each strand you should spend 1 hour. Why? Because there were 4 strands. What were they? Meaning-based input, meaning-based output, learning-focused, and finally fluency development, right? So there were 4 strands, 4 hours, so it means each one needs about 1 hour. So when we are focusing on meaning-based input, how much time should we spend? Obviously 1 hour. Okay, so how many parts does meaning-based input have? 2 parts. What were they? Listening and reading. So how much time should I use for each skill? 30 minutes. And now that we're focusing on reading, and we know that we should be spending about 30 minutes, what would this reading be? How would we read and what would we read? This is what we will discuss in this video, which is called extended reading. So this is one form of meaning-based input, that is extended reading, which we will discuss next. Okay. Well, now is the time to talk about extensive reading as part of what we do in meaning-based input. But before we do that, let's see what you do when you read in your mother tongue. Now, here I'll show you 10 sentences. Answer them about your mother tongue, not English. So, are we answering these questions about the reading in English? No. Are they about our mother tongue? Yes. For example, let's look at the first sentence here. What does it say? It says, it's always necessary for you to read every word of a passage. Just say true or false. Is this statement true or false for you? Okay, I think about my mother tongue, Farsi, and I say this is false. I don't do this when I'm reading Farsi, something in Farsi. Okay, now stop the video and answer the questions. Please write your answers on a sheet of paper. It might take you a few minutes, so please pause the video after you see the statements. Welcome back. Did you write your answers? Good. Now pause the video again and think of English and reading an English passage. Answer the same questions again, only what are we doing this time? Answering questions about reading in English. Right, so please pause the video now again and answer the questions. Good. I think we're all good. Did you mark the statements? The response to all these questions should be false. So if you have written true for any of the questions, it means you need to revise your knowledge of reading and how to read and what to consider while reading. Now, these are some of the strategies that we need to learn and develop in our course. Now, what is extensive reading? What does the word extensive mean? If I say someone's knowledge of literature is extensive, I mean it's very vast and covers a large area. Now in our case, extensive means reading a lot, maybe one book every 2 or 3 weeks. But is it possible to read one book in 2 or 3 weeks? Yes, if you listen to me carefully throughout this video. Now, extensive reading is a form of learning from meaning-based input. During extensive reading, learners should be interested in what they're reading and should be reading with their attention to the meaning of the text rather than to learning the language features of the text. Extensive reading can occur within class time or outside class time, But in our case, because we can't have our class, you should do it outside the class. But we have two major criteria or rules here. One, the level of the book you pick should be at or below your current knowledge of English. What does this mean? It means if you are at, say, B2 level, according to the CEFR, choose a book at B2 or B1. You know, there are some graded books, and they can help. You have definitely seen them. They are in different stages or levels. Pick one which is easy for you to read and follow. Remember, the ground rule is you should understand up to 98% of the words. Well, somewhere between 95 to 98% of the words, because the purpose of extensive reading is not to focus on grammar or vocabulary learning, but on improving your reading skills. Now, this estimate of 95 to 98 is probably conservative because Craver in 1994 did a research with native speakers, and he indicated that a knowledge of 99% of the words in a material is preferable for meaning-based input. Now, if we relate these densities to the vocabulary size needed to read an unsimplified fiction, we understand that you should have a vocabulary size of 9,000 words to read novels written for adults. Now, you have done your vocabulary size test on the site my.vocabularysize.com, except one person, and you know how many words you know. So that can help you understand what book works for you best. Does this mean in extended reading we have to worry about vocabulary learning? No. So how is this important? Well, if your vocabulary knowledge base is, say, around 6,000 word families, reading words at or below that level is recommended, or reading books, sorry, at that level is recommended. Not very lower, but if you say your vocabulary size is around 6,300 or something, according to the result of the test you had, then choose a book with 6,000 head words. You will see this when you're referring to some websites that I will recommend later. And remember, we want to be better readers, but the focus here is not on learning a vocabulary or grammatical structure. What are the rules here? Well, I mentioned that you will have to read a lot, that it's meaning-based, but what are the rules? Rule number one is pick something you enjoy, something interesting, something which is intrinsically motivating. Who knows what kind of books you like? Me? Obviously not. You are the best judge of that. I remember when I was a student myself, when I decided to read graded books, I read Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities. Well, I can say it was a page turner for me, and I couldn't put it down. So there are, as I said, two ground rules. What was the first one? The level, and the second one was your interest. So once again, let's review these two rules. One, choose something at your level, preferably below your level, and two, choose something which is enjoyable. Remember, another name for extensive reading is reading for pleasure. So now here are some general hints. I would recommend that you set goals for yourself. Decide how many books you would like to read during the semester. Of course, I'll give you something as an assignment, but please do not restrict to yourself to class assignments. Make reading a part of your daily routine. Set a time and place for reading. Read for at least 30 minutes at a time so that you can become involved in your book. Keep a journal, write your reactions to the book of choice and your thoughts, because these can be stimulating when you are reading. When you finish a book, complete an extensive self-report form, which I will attach in your Google Classroom. And on the next slide, you will find some useful websites too. Now, what are some of the advantages of extensive reading? I will just ask you to pause the video and look at some of these advantages, and I'm not going to discuss them because it's taking a very long time, and you can have a look. All right. One more thing maybe I would just wish to add here is that if we do extensive reading, it can motivate you to read more as you make what you're reading more meaningful. Is there any disadvantage to extended reading as well? Well, there might be some, but I would just like to focus on one disadvantage, and that is it does not pay off immediately. We need to be patient. So do not expect to be more fluent and a better reader after just reading 1 or 2 books extensively. Well, here are some links that you might find useful. I'll also add them to your assignment sheet so you can see. And all right, I think we wanted to learn what the 4 strands of nations well-balanced language course are and what extensive reading is, and I think we did it. That's it. Well, I hope you will continue supporting each other through these difficult times. Thank you very much for watching. Good day.